Hey, Frank, what are we talking nerdy about today?
The three principles of communication that every business owner should know.
Sounds awesome.
Talking nerdy. We're just talking nerdy. With all this talking nerdy. Oh, come on, you wanna talk nerdy?
Yeah, so Frank, three principles of communication every business owner should know. All right, where is this coming from?
Yeah, so I just started reading a book that you know and love, which is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I was just on a work trip and I needed something good to read, and I picked this up at the 50% off bookshelf. And I thought, man, I've been told I got to read this. So started to read it, and
Did I tell you you have to read it?
you and many people did. So
Okay, good.
I'm about 100 pages into it, and I was like, God, Chris and I got to talk about this because there's so many elements in here that I've noticed in the nerdpreneurs that we've interviewed and that we've met out on the road. And
So
I
are you
thought,
saying that I'm right, that it was a good recommendation?
you know what, Chris, you are right. You have excellent choice in books.
You have been reading. Look at this. You have been reading
right.
this. I can tell right off the bat, the principles are taking hold.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I definitely have. Yeah. So first off, before we jump into it, what is your experience with this book? Like, what do you think about it?
I started this book recommendation thing way before you, Frank. I've recommended this book to more people than any other book I've ever recommended. And I've seen it have tremendous impact on more people than I ever have. And you have to be careful when you're recommending a book like this to people. It's like How to Win Friends and Influence People. Like if you recommend it to some people, they're like, what do you mean? Am I not?
What are you saying about me?
Yeah. What do you say? Am I not good? That people. And so I remember I did have, for example, some salespeople. I got this guy named James, who is a great friend of mine. But when he came, and it was a pretty naturally good salesperson, but he had challenges when he started to deal with strangers, and sometimes sales call with him. And I remember just some of the very basic, fundamental, like how to be likable things
Right.
were missing. He was all sales tactics, all closing, all I'm good at the closing side of it, and not realizing the human side of it. And so I could have gone through and said, you got to change everything about your personality. But instead, I just recommended them the book. And he read like probably around 100 pages in. And he was like, oh my God, this book is changing my life. Every single part of my life is changing because of this book. I can't believe it. I'm so glad I wrote it or read it. And I'm just saying that that's been my experience. Every time I've given it to someone, generally they come back and being like, wow, that was incredible. I'm changing these things and it's really opening my eyes, because I think it takes the human side of just how we interact and communicate and brings it to the forefront into sort of principles or science that you can actually apply into your life.
Yes. 100%. And the other, like I kind of mentioned, that these are things I've started to recognize as I read. I recognize that these are things that we've noticed in nerdpreneurs. And I thought, Nerdpreneur, we're all about talking to people who are succeeding at pursuing their nerdy passion into a business. But it's kind of hard sometimes when you talk to these people to really distill it down into nuggets in like almost scientific, like you said, ways, things that are principles, you almost might call them. And this book happens to touch on them. And I would love it if, as we go through these, that we think about the people that we've interviewed or that we've met out on the road, so that folks, folks that are listening, if you want to learn more about what we're talking about, go and listen to those interviews, because we've interviewed a lot of wonderful people, and there's just so many ways that they're wonderful people and good at their business. So today we're going to go ahead and dive into those principles and take a look.
So yeah, I'm curious for you, since it's been a long time since I've read it. You're going to be guiding this a little bit. I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm sure I'll have some comments here and there.
Yeah.
And just before we start, the one thing I'll say is this is about communication skills, but it's really about improving yourself, personal growth. And why do we want that? Because as people communicate better, you'll see impacts in your business. You'll see impacts in the personal relationships that you have. You'll see impact in your overall opportunities that come into your world. Communication affects pretty much every single thing in your life and business. So that's why we felt this would be probably a great episode for people to do. And that way you don't have to go read the 100 pages. You can just listen to this and we'll get into distilling it down to how you can use it for your business. With that being said, Frank, what is the first principle that you want to talk about?
Gosh, you really nailed it on the head. Good communication skills open doors.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the first principle here is don't criticize, condemn, or complain. And that's very self-explanatory. But there was a part in this book that I thought explained it really nicely on page 38. I'll go ahead and read this excerpt here. When dealing with people, let us remember we are not dealing with creatures of logic. We are dealing with creatures of emotion, creatures bristling with prejudices and motivated by pride and vanity. And that is an important concept when digesting this principle. Humans, we use logic a lot to come to rational decisions and conclusions. But a lot of the time, and I'm sure folks have heard this idea before, we make decisions based a lot on emotions, especially in things like, stock trading. It's a highly emotional space, or just like what food that we want to eat that day. It's very emotional a lot of the time. So keeping that in mind.
We had a phrase in our sales company that was resonant, and it was, the people buy based on emotion, they justify with logic. So the idea of, I really want this and I could feel this product's going to make me feel a certain way. That's what we do, right? Like, but then what do we say? We have, let's ground this in an example. Take, for example, I want a new pair of shoes. I just bought some Korn shoes. I don't know if you know what that means.
No, I don't.
K Korn, okay? Korn, the band, they have these limited edition Adidas shoes that have come out just recently, and they've been doing releases every few months for Korn merchandise. And I'm a big Korn fan from when I was in high school, and so I look at these shoes and I'm like, oh, those are so cool, and I kind of need black shoes anyway. See, I really want these Korn shoes, but then my justification for it is I don't really have a pair of black shoes. Right. I don't really have a pair of Adidas shoes that could go with all these different things. Meanwhile, I clearly have like 6 or 7 other pairs of shoes I could wear, no problem. And I do have a pair of black shoes. They're just not Adidas shoes. So I really want these, and I'm justifying with logic. So we're not rational creatures, but rationale is used in service of our emotions, which is why if we go around criticizing people, what happens to their they logically turn to us and be like, why do I dislike this person? Or why is this person a jerk?
Yeah, you're touching on another really interesting point, which is a lot of the time we make the emotional decision and then we rationalize it backwards from the decision that we want. And we say, hey, here's the facts that support why I am drawn to this decision. Like you just said, you saw the Korn shoes, you really wanted them, and you had to decide, I don't really have any black shoes. Oh, perfect. There we go. And in this case, what's interesting about this principle is
now it makes sense to spend all that money, Frank.
Exactly. It makes sense.
It makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. I mean, this topic has come up a lot with the election right now, too. There's a lot of people that kind of had to, they knew who they were going to vote for in the first place in America. And it came down to, rationalizing it backwards for themselves, whatever it was. So the other reason this principle is important is because when we criticize folks, they get defensive. And then the walls go up, the doors close, they're not interested in talking to you anymore. It doesn't matter if you're showing off how smart you are. Nerds, we have this stereotype of, going to push up the glasses on the nose and we're going to explain why what is what. And that doesn't always go over very well with a lot of people. So sometimes you don't need to do that if you're trying to open a door or, ingratiate yourself and win a friend.
I can tell you from personal experience, this is something I'm very glad you're reading, just because, we have a great working relationship. In general, we get along well. But I will say there are things that when I have sent you content that I have created or spent some time making, often there is immediate criticism into what this should have looked like, or could you do it this way, or some other thing like that. And I don't want to say, I have a thick skin, as you all know. I've done sales and everything. I could take it. However, I will say
The way I deliver it.
no, I'm just saying, however, I am excited that you might start living into this principle when I send you content that I'm thinking of publishing, because you may not be aware, but I do have an emotional side to when I create something, and it has stopped me from wanting to create more. So I'm excited about this. It's not this, again, this is not me criticizing you, Frank. This is me inspiring you.
Are you condemning or complaining?
No, I'm not. I'm illustrating a point of where it can show up. And the thing is, you wouldn't even know.
I think it's a good example, though.
But you wouldn't even know. A lot of times the people who are complaining or like criticizing are not even aware of the impact it has on the other side.
Yeah.
And we have a very open communication in terms of how we communicate. We're pretty just straight up about, I don't like this. And by the way, I'm guilty of this too. I'm sure I have shit on lots of things you've created. So I'm just saying that when there's high tension and high, stakes in our ego wrapped up in things, it's very normal for us to just immediately look for what's wrong. And how do you practically use this? And this is a little practicality, is like, sometimes there's stuff that needs to be criticized. There does need to be criticism. However, how you do that is really important to know. So it's not the first reaction is immediately finding all the faults with something that someone might have put a lot of time and effort into. And also that can immediately turn to discouragement, and then they shut down. Discouragement leads to not doing anything, like inaction.
Disengagement.
Yes, discouragement leads to disengagement. Actually, I have a great story about discouragement, and I'll tell it in a second. But
I was going to say, on the point you just brought up about the feedback I give on like content you create, it's a really good point, because when working with other people, a lot of the time the nerdpreneurs we interview, they're solopreneurs. So the people that work together, there really needs to be a space for giving feedback. And I very easily could live in the space of fear of, if I gave you feedback, you would be hurt or you would be pissed and you would not want to do this anymore. Sure, I could live in that space, but I decided a while ago to live in the space of, hey, Chris is a big boy. I'm not being mean. These are things that I think, in the future, let's be aware of X or Y, maybe. And one time you said, hey, Frank, I don't like that music choice. And it was like, you know what? He has a good point. It's not a great song for this. Instead of me taking it personally, which I could have done, we have a conversation about it. And sometimes it's a very quick conversation of, Chris had a good point. I'm just going to fix it. So yeah, what's your anecdote? Sounded like you had something.
Well, the thing is that, criticism is often what leads to discouragement. And there's a story that I've told many times. It's a sort of fictional story, you'll see. But the devil, all right, was having a going out of business sale. And when he went and going out of business, he had he basically had a yard sale for all of his favorite tools that he'd been using to do this. So, all the demons come by to shop for his yard sale and go through and find, the thing they want, right? So there's like hatred and malice and like anger and like, jealousy and all these things, right? That the devil uses to do what he does, right? But then there's this one tool off to the side, kind of in the back, got a little bow on it. And the demons are like, well, what's that? Is that for sale? And the demons were like, can we get that? And the devil's like, that tool it's really special to me. It's the one tool that I'm not sure if I'm going to sell because it's been really important for all the work that I've been doing. And the demons look and say, well, what is it? And he says, well, that's the tool of discouragement. And with that tool, I get all the other tools to work. So the power in this discouragement is never good. Remember, when you take someone and criticize, you could elicit discouragement. I'm not saying we can't criticize. I'm not saying we can't do it, but you need to be aware of the impacts of discouragement, that it does a lot of these other things, and the devil sneaks in.
I totally agree. And, just putting a little bit of clarification on what is the difference, because what we're talking about is a very fine line, it sounds like. And for my own journey, when it comes to criticism versus giving constructive feedback, I would say constructive feedback is coming from a place of overall betterment. It's a place of improving whatever the project is, and letting, bringing the other person in on that benefit and the rewards, and growing, knowing that you and that other person will grow, rather than saying your feedback to break the other person down, to make them feel bad or discouraged in what you were saying. And I think I just watched a Star Trek episode last night. It had it introduced Lieutenant Barclay, and he's kind of this klutz in the episode. And in the beginning, people are, for Star Trek, this is pretty odd, but people were name calling him. They called him Lieutenant Broccoli, and they're kind of making fun of him, and there's that discouragement, and it's at his expense. It's not about him growing. The feedback he's getting is frustration, and people are angry with him. But eventually, throughout the story, it changes, and people bring him into the fold, and he helps solve the problems. And I think feedback is, where feedback differs from criticism is in that zone of, hey, we're looking to improve everybody and the product or project that we're working on. So with that said, who do you think in our nerdpreneurs are people who really embody this, that we've seen, that demonstrate? And I think there's a lot of them out there. It comes down to who is kind, who is aware of their competition and the hurdles that they might have, but they don't make a big hem and haw over it all.
Well, I think immediately of the artists that we've interviewed, just because of the requirement of them to be non-critical towards themselves and towards their art. So it's really important, just from a fundamental, if you're an artist, you've got to be able to, yes, take criticism and be critical, but also not be doing that too much, because you can shut yourself down in the creative space. And I think that's with any kind of creative. Like, a lot of the people we interview are creatives, but when you're in that creativity space, discouragement and criticism is not your friend a lot of times. I think anyone who's had a team understands the importance of working within that team and not criticizing people publicly. I think about Sienna, who we interviewed recently, talks about her team and how there are things that she was doing initially when she had new people in her staff, that she was like a micromanager, constantly telling people how to do something, how to criticize. And that was a lesson she had to learn the hard way, because micromanaging every little detail of what they do actually hurt her business. Her business started to thrive when she took a step back from that and said, I'm hiring you under the guise that you are capable. I am confident in you. And I want you to use that amazing brain that I know you have to solve the problems, and only ever come to me when there's something you do not know how or what to do to fix. And empowering somebody instead of criticizing them and taking control, micromanaging, all of those things are just principles of leadership. And I think that's what this could also be called, as principles of leadership or communication, because those things really show up.
Yeah, those totally true. The artists and the people that have worked in groups were really good at this.
Who do you think?
I was going to call out even just the first two people we interviewed. Ryan from Zephyr Workshop, he was really good at talking about his team and how everyone works together, saying you got to have a good team. And every time he talked about those people on his team, he was very supportive, and he didn't ever complain about, oh yeah, we had this one guy, or we have this guy on our team. He didn't talk bad about anybody. And in the same vein, also in the vein of video games or games, but video games this time, was JJ at Mythical City. He talked very evenly about the entire industry. He works primarily in the virtual reality world, and that is a world that is difficult. It is hard to make a game and have a game succeed very well in that space. But he wasn't complaining about oh yeah, it just sucks doing what I'm doing. I hate how I have to spend months, years on a video game, and then it doesn't do as well as I had hoped, and then I'm back at it again. He didn't say any of that. He just he was like, yeah, I like what I do. I like teaching myself stuff, and I love the process. So those are the kind of people that come to mind. The artists, like you said, totally agree. I'm constantly blown away by the positive feedback we get about our interviews, especially when you guys tell us how much you love the full-length versions. If you're getting a lot out of this show and want to support what we do, please check out our Patreon. You'll get access to ad-free, full-length episodes, plus some other really cool bonus content. So head over to patreon.com/nerdpreneur and join the
awesome Nerdpreneur board.
Now, back to the episode.
So what is your second principle?
Yeah. Second principle. So the second principle is give honest and sincere appreciation.
What does that mean in your mind about, like, what's the principle mean in practice?
Yeah. I would say in practice, this is gratitude, essentially. And gratitude is a really powerful concept, but it's more, this gets more nuanced than that. It's not just be grateful for your, be grateful and you will notice the benefits internally. Dale Carnegie goes in depth to explain why showing appreciation to others is going to improve your relationship with them. It's going to open doors with these people. It's going to make them more willing to listen to you, especially if you show that, well, let me back up for a sec here. He talks pretty early on in this second chapter about the different needs and wants that we have as humans. He lists health and the preservation of life, food, sleep, money and the things money will buy, life in the hereafter, sexual gratification, the well-being of our children, and a feeling of importance. And all of those are needs that we strive for. But the last one, a feeling of importance, is one that he talks about that we never really meet. We never fulfill that need or want, the feeling of importance. We're always chasing that want. So if people are constantly chasing this desire, this fulfillment, in quotes, if you will, of being important, then what's really going to work well if you want to befriend somebody is to let them know that you think they're important, that you respect them. And one of the ways to do that is to appreciate something that they have done. And there's a fine line here, and I'm curious what you think, Chris. What is the difference between appreciation and flattery?
So appreciation is honest and real. Flattery is often purposeful, but not honest. And so I think back again to my sales days, my sales management day. And we also had another phrase that I think many people might like. It's there are some people who go to bed hungry for food, but most people go to bed hungry for appreciation.
Wow, yeah.
So it's one of those things that it's very, in a job that I had, I was on straight commission as a sales manager, which means that if my people who I had, they were not employees, they were actually commission salespeople. So they had to go out, make commissions. Now, if you think it's hard to work on commission, it's really hard to work on commission when everyone underneath you has to work on commission. And so you actually you couldn't keep people around by just saying, oh, I'm paying you a salary. You had to keep them around doing the job with other things that weren't money. And one of the most important and crucial things that we used as a tool was genuine and sincere appreciation. Every week we had a sales letter, and I would go through that sales letter of the top 10 or top 15 or top 100 reps in the company, essentially across all of Canada. And some of my reps would inevitably be on that newsletter. And so every week I would, on Tuesdays, because the newsletter comes out on Monday, I would call every rep that was on the newsletter. And I would call them up like this and I'd say, hey, Frank, how you doing?
Great.
Awesome.
How are you, Chris?
I'm doing so good. You know why I'm doing so good, though, is I got this newsletter. And did you know last week in all of Canada, you were the number 38 representative?
What? That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I know. It's so crazy, right? I know. You've only been here a couple weeks, but I got to tell you, Frank, that is impressive. You're doing so good. And hey, I appreciate everything you did last week because our team was the number 4 office in all of Canada. And without you doing that thing you did and working so hard as you did, guess what? We wouldn't have been the top team last week and then the top 5. So I just wanted you to know you're awesome because you probably don't hear that nearly enough.
Thanks, man.
And then I was like, hey, I got to go. I got a few more people to call, but hey, you have an awesome day. I'm not. And that's it. We called these specifically appreciation calls. Now you might like, again, and I would go through that sometimes with, a dozen or more reps every Tuesday, maybe sometimes more. Even if they weren't on the newsletter, I try to find something that I could appreciate about them, because what happens when you hang up that phone, that person's not quitting. That person's not going home to their parents, and their parents are like, what's wrong with this sales job? You're not doing any demos. You're not making enough money. Or is that job even worth it? Then they have this ironclad like feeling that I just gave them of like, oh, I'm appreciated here. That's not something I felt many other places. And I don't know about you, Frank, but have you ever had a job where they just really made you feel that level of appreciation for what you're doing?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely have. There's been times where in my current job where I create something, I create some sort of content, and I get these genuine reactions of like, wow, I didn't see this at all throughout its process. And the final product, this is really good. Or I get clients. Clients usually kind of expect it. They don't really see any of your other work that often to really compare it. But the people on my team are like, damn, this might be the best one yet. And that is the kind of feedback I really appreciate.
But also, I just want to ask you, like, when you get that, like, where does your confidence go in what you're doing and that you're in
That's
the right
right. Yeah,
place?
exactly. I was going to say it definitely makes me my pride in the work that I do grows, and I take it more seriously. I take it more seriously. It raises my own bar, my own standard of what I do, and I want to. I mean, this might just be my personality type, but once that bar is raised, I want to raise it again. I want to continue to grow in those skills.
Yeah. One of the most powerful things you can do when you're working with a team is recognize what you want to be repeated. Recognition gets repeated, and what you make people feel appreciation for is what they decide to do again. And so it's something where like this is outside the realm of money and working within an organization. If you can just pull someone aside and say, or even publicly do it, is also great. Just how much you appreciate the work someone's doing or how much you appreciate what they've put in. I can't tell you how many times when I've done that in my organization, from the organization I work in right now, and how much of an impact it has had long term on the ability of a team to work better and more cohesively together. And you know what's funny is if you do that for other people, guess what they want to do?
They want to do more of it, or they want to reciprocate.
Yeah, they'll do it for other people. Like you start to create a culture where people appreciate each other for the work they're doing. And it's more than just a thank you. It's like, thank you so much. What you just did made such a difference in my day. Thank you. I appreciate you for it. Just stuff like that can go a long way.
It's such a better team to work on that is, appreciating each other. I don't know about you, man, but I've worked in a lot of different jobs and different companies with different work cultures. And the one right now that I'm in is a great workplace, but I've definitely worked in spots where it's just you kind of, you step on each other, or you highlight someone else's shortcomings, and it never felt good. I didn't stay there for very
How can
long.
a solopreneur use this? Like, I'm thinking about appreciation towards clients or customers instead of towards your team, because a lot of the people we're talking to don't have a team. They just have themselves.
It's an interesting point. I would say it's the people that you work with that aren't part of your team, but are people that you collaborate with. So maybe it's other people that are on your same, like if you're an influencer and you are talking to other influencers and you you show appreciation for some piece of content they made, for example. I could see that being a good way to eventually pave the way towards a collaboration, for example. Mm-hmm. What about you?
I think that people, when they have a following, especially on Instagram or TikTok or anything like that, you see lots of these influencers do appreciate their people. And the way they do that is by every 500 or 1,000, they do a giveaway and they're like, hey, I want to appreciate you guys for supporting me. Without you, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. And I'm just saying that every business that I've seen, from the artists to the tarantula breeders to the builders to anyone who's doing anything, that like the D&D people, they have times where they go from their regularly scheduled content to being appreciation content, where they just say, hey, I love you guys. I love what I get to do. And I'm so appreciative that you are the reason I get to do this. And the way you do that towards your people regularly, giving them that feeling that they're part of something bigger than just themselves, is so powerful. And I think many people forget that. The other thing is, I think about it from like, let me ask you this. When have you bought something, Frank, and felt incredibly appreciated by the company you bought it from?
Oh gosh. Well, I could say, anytime I do a Kickstarter, they send out a pretty heartfelt, thank you email of like, wow, we hit this record so fast, kind of a thing. And it's all thanks to you. But also the programs like Kickstarter and Game Fund, they usually have these kind of, after you make your purchase, there's kind of a metric of, hey, you contributed this much to this project, way to go. It's automated. It's built in to make you feel like, yeah, I bought something and I helped someone who was trying to make something. And that is a pretty cool feeling. It is pretty nice.
I think about people like T and Sweaty Fiddle, who she's changed her name. We got to get the new name for her, but the Mimic Bookmaker. If you look up that in our inner episodes, you'll find her. But the little details, even I think it's Dragon's Hoard Dice, who recently sent us some free dice just to be nice, because we've been giving advice to her. And I'll say, like, the handwritten notes that were put in there, the personal packaging, the little accents of details like thank you so much, and like the little extras that you can do to give your client a feeling of appreciation, that they are an important part of your business, and they're not buying from some Amazon company. They're buying from a person. They're buying from a real person. I think, Ether Objects does stuff like that too within giving Sienna Art Studios a personal page about her art and what it is and what it means to her, and all of that going along with it. Like, there's so many opportunities if you're new into this business to start thinking of how can you appreciate your clients for purchasing? How can you appreciate your clients for following? How can you appreciate your people for engaging? Where can you bring that appreciation in and get people to feel like they're part of something and special?
And it promotes them to continue doing that, which is great. And yeah, I totally agree, man. Yeah, those are all some great examples. It was funny, the examples I'd written down of nerdpreneurs that do this quite well, of the giving genuine, sincere, what is it? Honest and sincere appreciation. The people I had listed were Devin from Start Playing Games. The way we talked to him, he was super appreciative of the game masters that are involved at Start Playing, and he was really appreciative of us too, it felt really genuine. It felt really heartfelt,
of the community.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, exactly. The community, and it makes sense, on a hard, like, looking at the numbers, it makes sense because he wants to encourage people to stay in this community and continue to help his business thrive by being customers. But it also is just, you don't have to do this for the numbers. In fact, it's better if you don't. It's better if you genuinely want people to continue to do these cool things that you like, because as nerdpreneurs, let's face it, you're doing something you love. So showing appreciation for people that are also in that same space, it's going to be natural. And I think that is one of the reasons that nerdpreneurs are so unique, is that we genuinely love what we do and the people that we do it with. So that appreciation is genuine.
Yeah. And it's extra special when someone's buying creative work from you that is in a similar genre. Like, I think about Tony from Hero Within. Like, when you got your jacket, I'm curious, we may cut this, but like, what was the experience of opening that jacket when you got it from home? And was there extras like that I'm talking about?
Oh, it was so sick. I mean, I put that thing on and I just was like, God, I've never had a Star Trek jacket. And this just takes it to the level in a way that I'm proud of. It's something that I will wear. And I was like, God, like, this is sick. This is sick. You know, he designed it. We spoke to the guy and he was a great person to talk to.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah.
Was there something in the box beyond just the jacket, or was there anything else beyond that to make it feel special? Or
No, not really. I mean, the fact that we interviewed him though was pretty special, and the fact that we got to see him at the convention, getting to see him at the convention was pretty special.
Yeah.
So you kind of built that, and when I talked with him about Star Trek, you know, he was able to nerd out with me, so he wasn't just some salesperson. That's pretty important. Is that you talk to someone who's a salesperson and they care about it equally as much as you do, if not more.
Yeah, I just think to myself, like, man, what kind of opportunity is there to just foster even more appreciation by just putting in a little note or putting in something like that that is, for a true fan, for a true Star Trek fan, we appreciate serving true Star Trek fans, like just something cool like that. What would that do for somebody in that space when they're getting something exciting for them to be like, oh, I'm going to buy lots more stuff from this place? Like,
yeah,
again,
you feel like a community.
Exactly. Or having an opt-in to go and, hey, you want to share how this looks? Share it here as part of our community. Again, I'm just giving ideas for business owners who we've interviewed, because I think we have ideas that they may not be thinking of. But this is something that I would think about as a business owner. How would I create that experience when someone purchases? I think we're running low on time. Should we get to the third one?
Yeah, there was some things you said earlier too that I'd love to come back to. We'll come back to this. This is going to be a recurring topic, I'm sure. So
for sure. Well, what's the third one that's on your mind here?
Yeah, principle 3: arouse in the other person an eager want.
Oh yeah, turn them on. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. You can tell this book was written in the 30s because it's using some old English.
Oh, yeah.
So arouse in the other person an eager want.
So first, what is that and how do you do that?
So, direct quote from the book: why talk about what we want? That is childish, absurd. Of course you are interested in what you want. You are eternally interested in it, but no one else is. The rest of us are just like you. We are interested in what we want. So the only way on earth to influence other people is to talk about what they want and show them how to get it. So that core concept here, that core principle, if you can grasp it, it's going to help you get what you want from other people, because you can't make other people do what you want. You really can't, especially if you want them to want to do it. Like you could, sure, an example in this book is you could put a gun to somebody and say, do this thing I want you to do. Sure, but they won't want to do that. So short of going to those kinds of extremes, how do you get somebody to do what you want them to do?
This is such a key principle. And if you want to get really good at this, I recommend going into sales for a while. You cannot sell anything if you're focused on what you want. You have to eliminate all of that when you're selling something and focus all on what the client wants, what your ideal client, your avatar, if you will, really wants. And so one of the things, this is how you create great marketing. This is how you create a great offer. This is how you craft any style of business, is by getting off self and into the mind of the person who's going to view what you're selling. And then when you put yourself in the other position, then you have an opportunity to really start thinking of how will this be received? What would this person really want? What are their deepest, darkest fears or insecurities about this thing? And what can my product show them in terms of an opportunity? What do they really want? And if I were to, ground this in an example of something here, I think about someone like Monkey DM when he is selling his products, Monkey DM is a dungeon master. He spends a lot of his time teaching content on Instagram and TikTok on how to level up your gameplay, but he sells his fifth edition modifications or adventures, basically
Homebrewed content. Yeah.
homebrewed content to make games better. And so what happens is, by putting himself into, like, he's very adept at fifth edition. He's been a dungeon master for a long time, right? So for him to run a game is pretty simple at this point because he's done it for a long time. He's on live streams. He's created a lot of things, but he has to get out of that mindset and into the principles of the new people coming into the space and think, what would these people really desire? And what are the pieces of content that are really going to resonate with them, meeting them where they're at? And that is so key for any business owner to do, is get out of the self-talk and into the mind of the person you're trying to reach in order to craft your content and craft your copy, your offers and products.
Yeah, that's why it's so important for you to understand, if you're trying to sell a product, what does your customer actually want? You can, of course, we're all about people making products that tie into their nerdy passion. Ideally, that product ties into what other people also want, because otherwise you're just going to be making products for yourself. So figuring out what people want is going to be a great way for them to do what you want, which is to presumably buy your product.
We had a time in my business where I was very unsuccessful as a sales manager. And one of the reasons was, as a sales manager, I was constantly focused on what I needed, which was my bills paid. And it was like, I am putting a lot of money up, renting an office.
Right.
I'm putting my money into all the supplies for the team and time and energy training them, providing the training materials. Like, there was a lot of money. I put thousands of dollars into this business to get started. And then there was like no sales, or people would be struggling to make money or do the job. And that led to me having no money coming in. And I realized that just made me care more and more about what I wanted, which was more sales coming in. And when you sit down with a sales representative and talk with them about what you want, it really doesn't work very well to motivate them. I want you to sell more. They're like, well, I want to sell more too, but that's not what I like. So you have to actually, whenever I would sit down with reps, I did this one thing. I would say, no matter what was going on in my life, I had to get off self and on purpose. And my purpose was to help every single person in my office get the best skills and experience they could from the job while they were with me. And so that became my purpose. By giving that to my purpose off self, it didn't matter what I wanted. I would just not think about me at all. I would think 100% about them. And then from there, my questions became not so much of like, how much can you do this week? But like, hey, let's talk about, how much would you want to make? What are some things? What are your objectives in this job? Why did you take this job in the first place? And then as I started to learn more about what they really desired, which might be, I wanted to learn communication skills, or I wanted to make a little extra cash around school, or I wanted to, make $1,000 a week. Then I could then take that and say, can I show you how to do that? Because it's actually, you can do it. And let me show you how, but I think you might need to change a couple things that you're of your daily activity. And then I would just walk through it with them. And all of a sudden, because I was working with what they wanted, the things I said resonated and it became valuable and it actually started to work. And that's why, I say all this stuff about when I had a hard time as a sales manager. I did that for 10 years and I was very successful after my first year. But a large part of the reason why I became from one of the worst managers in the company to a year or two later, one of the best, was this one thing. Was changing my mentality and working with people from being off self and on purpose.
Yeah. Instead of focusing on what you wanted, which was them to buy from you, you focused on what value or what are their problems? What are their goals right now? And how this thing that you have might address that need for them. Yeah. There's, in that vein, I mean, I have examples too in my job, whether it's, hey, so-and-so, does your marketing team need support? If so, I will help them create content, images or videos so that you can sell. If you're interested, I'd love to hear more about your marketing strategy and goals. Let's have a meeting. And then so the meeting then focuses all on their goals and strategy rather than me just saying, cool, hi, nice to meet you. Here's our offers. Here's our prices. What would you like? It's more focused on, okay, you have these problems, these solutions, you have these problems and these goals. I can provide you the solutions. In that same vein, something a bit more grounded in what nerdpreneurs might be experiencing is, if you are trying to say you want to get your product in the hands of an influencer so that they will show it off and use it, and you are having a hard time, getting a response from them at all, determination is a big part, persistence, but also making sure that your message is compelling. I think of how you would start it off. A lot of the time we would say, hey, so and so, I want your help to show my product. Whereas they're just going to say, oh, cool. They're just thinking about themselves, that the influencer that you're trying to contact is going to read it and say, cool, I don't care. I don't care because it's all about this other person. They're not aware of my problems, my needs as an influencer because I'm busy as hell. So instead, if you turn that around and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Influencer, you need to make content regularly. I'm sure it's very demanding. I have an idea for something that you could do. I would be happy to, write the script, give you the product for free. And, should you like the idea and want to go ahead with it, it would be an awesome boon to my growing success. And I'd be happy to work with you again in the future. Maybe we could work out some sort of affiliate program so that you can continue to benefit down the road. So showing that there is not only interest in and awareness, you've put yourself in their shoes of, hey, they need to make content. And then, hey, I will do most of the work, which is usually a real drag for a creator. And then, hey, further down the road, we can continue to do work together and you will also make some money. And all of this continues towards your ultimate goal as someone who's making products, to sell more and more of your product, especially tapping into an audience. And who knows, maybe you will win a friend and influence more people by doing this. Crazy, right?
Yeah, I love that, because you're going to position things with focusing on what they want, not what you want. And if you help, there's a phrase from Zig Ziglar where he says, if you help enough people get what they want, then you can have everything that you want.
Yeah. That is, yes, you actually hit the nail on the head. There was a final thought that I wanted to add, and you essentially said it. It was, the world is full of people who are grabbing and self-seeking. So the rare individual who unselfishly tries to serve others has an enormous advantage. He has little competition. It's almost exactly what you just said. So that's pretty funny.
Mm-hmm. Well, Zig Ziglar is, he's got some great phrases. And I'll tell you, just like I got a lot of those swimming around up in my head that I've just said dozens and dozens of times when I was sales training. And so
you were just a walking quote of the day.
Yeah, it's tough to compare or contrast those. Tough to compare to a Zig Ziglar. He was one of the best wordsmiths out there. But yes, yeah. I agree. I'm glad we finished on the same thought.
Yeah, right. We both got to the same place, different quotes. Yeah, you mentioned Monkey DM. It's a great example. And for folks that are looking for other people who have done a good job of this, I would recommend T from Creatures Who Craft, which you already mentioned, and even Melogy. Melogy did a really great job of putting herself in the shoes of other people and making music that they would like to listen to for what their needs were, whether it was going to sleep or just, dealing with anxiety. So give those episodes a listen if you're looking for some people who have done a great job of that. Well, thank you, Chris. Thanks for going on this journey with me into a book that you know very well and a book that I am just finally reading.
Yep. We're going to get you some friends and teach you how to influence people. I'm just kidding. But hey, I'm super excited that you're reading the book, and I am also super excited to continue sharing insights from this book. If people like this, hey, let us know. Drop a review, share it with your friends, or even just tell one other person about this podcast if you got something of value, because that is the only way that this gets out to more people. We need you, and we appreciate all of you for the support and listening that you are doing for us. And with that in mind, as always,
keep it nerdy.